Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're going to clean your project up with modules. So this one's all about making our server.js file much smaller. Right now everything you have in your server.js file, this can lead to hard to manage code that isn't very expandable. Create two new files, routes.js and auth.js. Both should start with the following code. Module.exports is equal to function, and then we pass in app and my database as the parameters. So now in the top of your server file, require these files like so. Constant routes is equal to require, and then they go .routes file. So in .js. Server, right after you establish a successful connection with the database, instantiate each of them like so. Routes app database. Routes app database. Okay, cool. So finally take all of the routes in your server and paste them into your new files. Then remove them from your server file. Also, take the ensure authenticated function, since it was specifically created by routing. Now you will have to correctly add the dependencies in which they are used, such as constant passport, require passport, at the very top above the export line in your routes.js file. Keep adding them until no more errors exist. Your server file no longer has any routes, except for the route in the catch block. Okay. Now do the same with the auth.js file and all the things related to authentication, such as the serialization and the settings up, the local strategy, and erase them from the server file. Be sure to add dependencies in, such as auth app database to the server in the same spot. Submit your page when you think you've got it right. Okay, cool. So this is all about pulling your code out, separating it into files, which is going to make it easier to understand. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create two new files, routes.js and auth.js. And we know that because we're going to pull them in here, we want to make sure that we add them in the same file, I suppose. You see, I would like to put these into separate folders, but I guess we're just going to put them into routes. So I'm just going to create a new file, and I'm going to say, we're going to call this one routes.js. So this is down here now. They want us to start each one. This is just kind of like the way that we do it. Module.exports function like that. And so now I'm just going to go console.log routes file loaded. So this is just going to be able to make us sure that we're not getting an error of not loading the file properly. The other one is going to be auth.js. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm just going to make a new file here. Right click there and click A, or you can go right click and say new file. And we're going to call this one auth.js. And so I'm going to paste this in here. This is all the same, but we want to say authentication file loaded. All right. So now that we've got those exporting, we want to require them in the server. So I'm just going to copy this guy, and we're going to open up the server.js, and I'm going to slide up to here, and I think I'm just going to put it. Yeah, I'll put it right here after we kind of set everything up. So go routes, but then we're also going to go auth. And we'll create this auth, auth.js. Okay, so now if I save this, we should be able to go over to our server, and if I refresh the page on our local host, we should see it running. Okay, so it doesn't seem like we've got them required correctly. Auth.js, routes.js. Okay, so we're not getting them exporting correctly. I think we need to add something there. Finally okay, so the first thing that we did was create the two files. Both should start with the following code. Now, in the top of your server file, require them. Require routes.js. So here we have require routes.js, const auth, UTES routes, routes. Right after you establish a successful connection with your database, instantiate them like this, routes app database. Okay, so maybe we're bringing them in, but we're just not instantiating them yet. So now we'll go back to our server file, and we're going to go down. Here we have our database set up. Right now we have this console log of database properly set up, so we can do routes app my database. My database is pulled in through here, and then the app is being pulled via we create it here, and then we set it up here, and so we're passing routes into there. And so let's do it for routes, and we'll also do it for auth. So now if I save that, so yeah, you can see here, it's auth is saved as authentication. And so now, okay, cool. I saved it, and then when I saved it, Nodemon automatically refreshed, and then we loaded our database successfully. We loaded our routes file, and our authentication file was loaded. So now we know that we have now we've got places to put code for routes and authentication. Nice. Okay, finally take all the routes in your server and paste them into your new files and remove them from the server file. So all of our routes files. So that's going to be like anything that's like app.route. Okay, so let's take, so I'm going to put the routes file and the authentication file down here just by clicking and dragging them, and just to make it so that they're right next to each other. Because we verified that it's being loaded correctly, we don't need this anymore. So I'm going to first off get rid of the home directory. So I'm going to press Command X and put this into here and save it like that. Now this serialization, this is part of authentication, so we're not going to do that. But login and profile, these are also part of routes. So I'm going to get rid of those from the server file and save them into our routes file. Now we know ensure authenticated is needed in our routes file, and so we can't leave this function here. What we want to do is get rid of it pull it out from here and ensure that we add it near where it's being used in ensure authenticated. Now our register route is also in here. This one might be tricky because we have our route here. But then we also need to be able to say passport.authenticate, but we'll be able to bring that in. App.route for logout, app.use. For our 404, this is also a route. So let's just pull all of these guys as well. So I'm going to Command X. Now that's the authentication, so we're going to not use that. And I'll pull these into here, paste it into here. App.route. Okay, and I'm just going through and checking to make sure I've got my indentation correctly. App.route, function, app.route. These guys should be indented to the line. So I'm not sure what's causing that indentation error. Okay, so if we save this, let's see what happens over here. Yeah, I need to save the server file, and that shows that I've removed a bunch of those things. Cool. Passport is not defined. Now these reference errors are what are going to really start to direct how we operate. So passport's not defined. Well, we're requiring passport here. So what we want to do is remove it from the server.js and save it to the routes.js file. So now if I save this, you see the route it crashed once I saved the server.js. But now that I've saved the passport in here, I should be able to save this here. Cool. And so passport is not defined. So passport must be being used in here somewhere. So I'm going to press Command F and see where it is. App.use passport initialize passport.session. Okay, so I don't want to remove it from the server file because this is part of the instantiation process. So I'm going to put it back in here and save this. Cool. Authentication file loaded, and we had a successful database connection. That's good news. So if I refresh the page, this is my production server. That was a mistake. So I want to go to my localhost, refresh the page, and see if everything loads. Cool. It looks like everything loaded properly. So that means that we've removed a bunch of the routes from there, and we've put them into a separate file. And you can already see that that makes it so that these files are a little bit more reasonable to look at, right? So let's move over to the authentication file. And I'm just going to operate. You have to correctly add the dependencies which are used as passport require.js at the very top of the export line in routes.js. Now, see, we just did that. What they meant by that was I'm adding the passport here. So also take the ensure authenticated function. Okay, cool. That was the ensure authenticated function, which we have here. And that's what they meant by that. Keep adding them until no more exists. And your server file no longer has any routes except for the route in the catch block. So let's see what the catch block is. in the server, we have our couch and our route here. And so we want to leave this one here in the case that we have an unsuccessful database connection. Cool. Now that the same thing for your auth file with all the things related to authentication, such as serialization and setting up the local strategy to erase them from your server file. Cool. So in our auth file right now, we can get rid of the console log because we've already checked that it loads. And so now we're going to scroll up and we're going to look for things that are related to our authentication. So we only want to use things that after we set up here. So routes and auth, we've got auth in there, but our passport serializer and our deserializer, these are exactly the things that we want to extract into this separate file. So it looks like we're good with that. The object ID. Okay, I'm not sure if that's going to work in the long run, but we save that. Local strategy for authentication, find one. The database stuff, I think that we want to pull our passport out from here as well. So if we save that and put it into our authentication situation, our authentication file, JS file, we can save here. So yeah, here it's saying passport is not defined. Let's see, do we have passport? Okay, yeah, we do have passport in here as well. So we're gonna have to require that at the top of this file. And to do that, we'll just do it the exact same way we do it here. We copy that and paste the passport requirement file into auth.js. And now it doesn't automatically save, so we just want to come back up to server and press save. That'll make it so our node mom kicks it off. So local strategy is not defined. Cool, well, local strategy is defined here, so let's pull it out from the server file and save it into our authentication file. And save the authentication JS file and save the server file. And now it looks like things are up and running. It's good that we pulled the local strategy out to see if we actually needed it in this file, because now that we don't, we're able to extract the logic for authentication from the server.js file. And so the server.js file is able to bring in all this information with just this simple single line of code right here. So let's get rid of no, I'll leave that in there. Title, if you change the title. Nice. And so if I save the server file, I think that that's pretty good. Do the same thing in your auth.js that will follow things related to the authentication, such as serialization, the setting up of the local strategy, and erase them from your server file. Be sure to add dependencies in and call auth app my database, auth app my database. These both need semicolons at the end in the server in the same spot. Submit your page when you think you've got it right. Okay, so I think that we've got it right. We set up the database, we set the routes, we set the user authentication strategy, the database is set up, and if there's a problem, we do it that way. But can you already see how much cleaner this code is? Because now this file, instead of being this tremendously complex file, now is just brought down into something that's quite simple. And out here, we have a file in which everything is related to the thing that we're trying to do here. This is the routes file. There's just routes here. So that's really useful. Cool. So now that we've saved all that stuff, we want to take it over to, we want to deploy our code to GitHub. So we're going to go git status. We'll see that we've added this file and we've added this file and that we've modified the server.js file. So that's good. So we want to go git add, git commit -m. Add with the period means I'm adding all three of the elements. And here, extract authentication and route logic to separate files. And then we're going to say git push Heroku master, which is going to push my local version of the application up to the Heroku deployed server, which was publicly available at Savannah Heroku app here. So we'll be able to see that once this the code has been pushed to the production server. Okay, cool. So now that it's deployed to the server, we can open it up using this. One other way you could open it up, you can go Heroku open, and that will pop the file open in a new file on your computer. So as you can see, I already had it there, but this is the one that just popped up. So now I can copy this URL and bring it over to the solution link and give it a try. So let's see how it goes. Awesome. Looks like we completed that one. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. That was all about extracting logic into separate files. That is really useful stuff. And I would just want to go over one more time. You know, what we're doing is we're extracting the logic into separate files, and we're making them available by saying module.exports is equal to this function. And then, so it goes by, I'm guessing, yeah, it must go by the name of the file. And so because this is no routes.js, what we can do is in our server file, after we instantiate our database and we start our server, it says the database has a successful connection. So that means we got our async, our wait here, and then we're setting the routes. And where do we get the function routes? Well, it comes from us right here. We create a constant function of routes, and that requires our folder called routes. So that's where you get the name routes, and then we pass in our app and our database. This module.exports takes our function and sets app to equal to app and database equal to database. And so the same thing we do with authentication. The auth is set up here, and because it goes to this file, and we set the two prerequisites or the two libraries that we want equal to the same thing, and then we can reduce them from having too big of a requirements out here. So because local strategy is only needed within our authentication sort of mentality, our authentication capacity of tools that we need to authenticate users, we can remove it from this file and then call it within this file. And so, yeah, that's the way that this works. And because these files are all so much smaller and easier to work with, that makes it so that this becomes a much more manageable and extendable application, because you could also just pull this authentication strategy into a separate system that you might need sometime in the future without having to redeploy all the code over and over again. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next lesson.